Want to go ahead and bring on my guest, David, who is the founder and CEO of Music Global Music Industry ETF. The ticker is MUSQ. David, how's it going?
Junaid, great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had such great conversations already. I know Nate had some great things to say about your ETF, but just for the viewers that might still not get it, give us a quick, brief overview of what is it that your company does.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of the MUSQ Global Music Industry ETF, Junaid. So we capture the growth and innovation of music companies around the world across 5 different verticals: streaming, content and distribution, live music events and ticketing, equipment and technology, and satellite and radio. MUSQ is the first pure play music ETF, giving investors a front row seat to this booming industry.
Why did you want, why the creation of this Music Global Music Industry ETF, right? What does it aim to achieve at the end of the day?
Yeah, so first, I've been investing in public and private companies for the last 25 years in music. I owned a lot of music publishing companies. I used to own all the rights to MC Hammer, JJ Cale, Nick Drake, a lot of Michael Jackson songs. And what I realized as an investor and as an owner, all your money was locked up in these firms. If you wanted to be an investor in music historically, you had to be an LP at Blackstone, KKR, Apollo. Your money was locked up. Yeah. Today, you have so many music companies. So what I really wanted to do was create a very liquid and portable way for retail investors, because now you have there's over 100 public companies worldwide. And we've designed an index to really, and an ETF to capture the growth and performance of this industry and let investors get exposure. If they want exposure to Tom Petty's, acquisition, or Springsteen or Neil Young, or they want to get exposure to Taylor Swift. Look, Taylor signed to Universal Music Group through Republic Records, right? That's a top holding. She has a deal with Live Nation. That's one of our top holdings. She has publishing deals with Sony. That's one of our top holdings. So you could pick any artist, whether it's The Weeknd, Drake, Taylor Swift, and we're giving investors exposure. We want to give investors a taste of all that success.
I'm sure the Swifties are listening and about to start investing. I think liquidity is also something where it might not be as easy to invest in certain artists, but you can kind of get a slice of the pie by going through the routes that you've mentioned with your ETF. Let's get a little bit into the weeds with terms of, give me an overview of the investment strategy, right? To capture this performance that you're talking about, what goes into that mindset when you're trying to see which companies to include?
Yeah, so this is a passively managed fund. The eligibility requirements are such that all the companies have to generate greater than 50% of their revenues from music, or they have to be a top 5 player or control more than 10% global market share in any of those 5 verticals. So we have companies like Universal, like Sony, like Live Nation, like Sphere in Las Vegas, like Madison Square Garden. And we also have big company names like Apple, Amazon, and Google, which, even though they don't generate more than 50% of their revenues from music, they're still top 5 players. Because after Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and Google are like the second, third, and largest, streaming player, right? And in the U.S. today, 84% of all music consumption is dominated by streaming. So we had to give investors exposure to these names, but those names are capped at 7%. So the entire fund is market cap weighted. We have small cap, mid cap, and large cap names. A lot of foreign companies are in this fund. Companies like HIM, which is the largest content company in Taiwan. Companies like Avex in Japan, Tencent. We have all the K-pop companies. We have Hive, JYP, YG+. Companies like Believe in France. Companies like CTS Eventim, which is, the counterpart to Live Nation in Germany. Companies like Click Digital in Great Britain. A lot of these companies are really hard to trade, right? You have to open up local accounts in these foreign countries, and it costs money to do that. And so we wanted to create something really portable, really convenient for investors to get real global exposure to this music industry.
I just cracked a chuckle because I had a coworker Slack about how a Swiftie is listening, how she wanted to kind of get some insights on exposure. So it's good that we have some listeners kind of getting educated on this aspect of things. You talked about Apple, right? Doesn't have its revenue 50% or more coming from the music, but obviously it does so many great things and it has exposure in terms of market share there. How do you kind of figure out which dynamics and how to kind of weigh things when you're putting these ETFs together? What goes behind the decisions to have the dynamics of the music industry?
Yeah. So, well, first, we scrape the universe of music companies, okay? And so they have to generate more than 50% of their revenues from music. Or like I said, they have to be a top 5 player. So today, like, Apple, Amazon, Google, they're big players in the global streaming business, right? And so we had to include them. But, today about 35% of our fund is all streaming companies, right? So we've got 14 streaming companies in the fund. A lot of the names I mentioned, companies you haven't even heard of, but are important, like Genie Corp and Kakao. You never heard of these. These are the top 2 streaming companies in South Korea. These are big companies, right? Companies like Tencent, like Click Digital. So 35% of these companies are streaming, 35% are content, right? These are all the record labels you mentioned before. They're also all the publishing companies, royalty trusts, right? Companies that these songwriters and publishers are selling their assets to. That's 35% of the fund. 10% of the fund is all live music events and ticketing. We have companies like Vivid Seats, Live Nation, Sphere. Sphere is on fire right now. I don't know if you've been to Las Vegas, the U2 show. They got the Grateful Dead. Dead & Co. is performing with John Mayer. That's like a monster stock. We have Madison Square Garden. And then we've got all the equipment and technology. So that's about 10%. Equipment and technology is 10%. And then satellite and radio is 10%. So those are sort of the weights. And here's something I just really want to get across today to investors, okay?
Yeah.
Guys, music today is the most undervalued, underhyped, undermonetized media asset. That's not me saying that. That's JP Morgan saying that. That's Goldman Sachs. If you read the Goldman Sachs Music in the Air report, right? Music today is an $80 billion business. It's going to $171 billion by 2030. You have 600 million paid streaming subscribers. That's going to 1.2 billion by 2030. Recorded music today is growing at 10 to 12%. Streaming is growing at 11 to 13%. It's growing 20 to 25% in many of the emerging markets like Latin America and Africa and parts of Asia. So music today is really on steroids, okay? And this fund captures all that growth, all that innovation. If you look at all of our holdings across streaming, across content, and live music today, revenues are up 10 times from COVID. Okay, last year was just a monster year. People want to go out and they want to see live shows, and the cost of these tickets keep going up. And you can't replace these experiences. So live music is growing. And then you layer on like AI and blockchain, and that's just putting the entire industry on steroids right now. Tons of artists, songwriters are uploading anywhere from 100 to 150,000 songs a day. So we are all these companies that are driving AI, driving blockchain, giving tools to artists and songwriters to create new music. That's what this is doing too. So we are here at the front row, just giving investors exciting opportunities to invest in these companies. And these companies are on fire right now. Spotify is up 130% for the last year. It's up like 70% year to date. Sphere is up 25%. CTS Eventum is up 25% year to date. Universal, all these record companies reported record revenues because all the streaming companies are now raising rates for the first time in 15 years. Music is cheap. You pay $11 a month. You pay double that for Netflix, for HBO Go, for Hulu. So these streaming companies are going to continue to raise rates, and then 70% of those revenues are going to pass down to all the record companies. And that's why literally Warner Music Group, Universal, Sony, all the smaller labels, they all reported record revenues in the last quarter for that reason, because streaming is growing, the number of paid subscribers is growing, the amount that they're charging their subscribers is growing. So they're developing new users and they're squeezing incremental revenue from existing users. And there's very low attrition because music is cheap. Like people actually have multiple music accounts today, right? Because the curation is different on Spotify, right? Spotify may have Spotify clips and Spotify Wrapped, like we talked about, right? Apple may have something else. I just checked out. Spotify has this cool personal DJ right now. I logged on yesterday. They're like, hey, what's up, David? What can I stream for you today? Like new me. So all this AI stuff is really engaging. And so kids love it, adults love it, families love it. They want to have a few of these services, and just music is simply too big to ignore today. It is a massive, massive business today. And there's so many great companies out there, and I just had to make it accessible for investors around the world.
Yeah, 3 points for me. You're absolutely right in terms of the innovation, which I'll get to here in a couple of questions. But music itself might be cheap, but kind of like what you alluded to, live music and concerts definitely aren't, right? I made a Swiftie joke earlier, but I wanted to go to a Taylor Swift concert with a friend, and I had to wait. I was like, yeah, when's that direct deposit going to hit? Because these tickets are pretty expensive. And then another thing that you mentioned was also the technology and the equipment exposure as well, right? Because no matter what musician or what, industry you want to follow in terms of music, if they're putting on a live show, they need the equipment, right? We have our own events that happen, and we know that we need a certain type of tech and equipment to make that happen, regardless of what type of show it is. You mentioned, I believe it was South Korea and their numbers in terms of the company exposure you have. So we have a question in the chat about, K-pop. And if that's big, I want to take that question into a broader sense of, let's talk internationally and how that industry is growing in terms of any other segments you're focusing on in the international space when it comes to music and live concerts and those type of experiences.
Okay, so that's a great question, whoever asked that. Yesterday, Universal Music Group announced a 10-year deal with HYBE, right, to be the exclusive marketing and promotions company for HYBE in South Korea, right? Yeah. And so you got massive bands coming out of South Korea: BTS, Monsta X, Blackpink, Once, which is like the #1 album today. It's like these 5 beautiful women or 8 beautiful women from South Korea. Music's like massive in South Korea. After the US, right, South Korea is the biggest exporter of content. So there are, South Korea, and by the way, and now they bought quality control. They bought, management companies that control the rights to Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber. So these companies are very intertwined today with the U.S. recorded business. And so, there's literally 12 K-pop companies in our fund, from JYP, YG, YG Plus, HYBE, all these streaming companies. So the content's big. And it's just interesting. Whoever asked that question must be on the pulse, because yesterday a huge deal was announced, to take advantage of all that South Korean content. Yeah. So we have to give investors exposure to that.
We can thank Sydney Osborne, our viewer, consistently coming back for these webinars and shows. We appreciate her question. Let's go ahead and final question for me in terms of trends and technologies. I told you I'd bring this back, and something that I shared with you in our prep call was Pandora, right? I'm in college and I love certain type of music, anything that's catchy. I don't care what language it is, Latin, Arabic, Persian, French, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a good beat and it got a catchy chorus, I like it. And Pandora, for the folks that might be a little too young to know what it is, it would kind of take that music and scientifically suggest other types of songs similar to that same genre, the same beat that you might end up liking. That to me was an awesome innovation. Unfortunately, they couldn't, they got taken over in terms of market share and all that by Spotify. But on that trend though, what are some technology advancements that you're seeing, especially with the impact of AI and blockchain kind of being the focus of what everyone's talking about today?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So look, all these music streaming services today are all using AI to generate incremental revenue from their subscribers, right? Whether it's personalized playlists, now you can announce kind of lyrics, and they can give you songs that have around your favorite lyrics. Like I said, they have DJs that are curated and personalized to you. There's tons of short form content. So Spotify is taking over kind of some of that market share from TikTok right now. They're really moving in because Universal Music Group pulled their catalog. So they're really trying to go after that TikTok audience right now by creating content that flows up and down the screen. We talked about stuff like Spotify Wrapped. There's the Spotify Clips is so all this stuff is really around getting to the consumer better. Blockchain is having a huge impact just as the digitization of music is growing. So what we're talking here is at the front end of music, but just so you understand, on the back end now, direct payment rails are being set up between artists that have their music stream, and they can actually get paid one penny per play, right? So they can actually get paid in real time instead of waiting 9 months for the performing rights societies to collect their revenue. So that's how blockchain is changing everything. All the companies in our fund, from Yamaha, Roland, Dolby, Sonos, these are all providing tools to artists to sample, to create new music, which they're uploading today. You have all these do-it-yourself services today, like DistroKid and Cobalt, where you can actually upload and distribute your own music today. So it's easier than ever for an artist to literally create their own music and upload it the next day, get paid for it right away when it gets played. This is what's going on right now. It's the digitization of music on the front end, whether it's personalization and AI, and on the back end with blockchain and the way artists, songwriters, and producers are getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much innovation that's happening on that aspect of it. You had TikTok that just added another layer of music to like these trends that are happening. And then you have the common man and woman that can create their own videos and dances and gain popularity through it while, having music in the background that kind of gains exposure to the artists themselves. And you have Spotify, you mentioned the DJ aspect of it. The other day I logged on and I could just kind of flip through what type of music I like and they would suggest different things. So a lot of innovation happening on that aspect as well. David, it's been a great conversation, man. I love music. I think it's, such a cool and key part of a lot of people's lives. It's interesting to kind of get some exposure from an investment standpoint as well. So I appreciate your time here today.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for having me. Everyone, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I write about music all the time. And I encourage all the investors who are interested, go read the Music in the Air report by Goldman Sachs. Lisa Yang is the top research analyst in the world on this subject. Go listen to her interviews, go read the report. And you can also look at the IFPI report and the RIAA report on just statistics around the growth of music and why it's a compelling investment opportunity. Thanks a lot for having me, Junaid, on your show today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. That is David, who is the founder and CEO of MUSQ Global Music Industry ETF. The ticker is MUSQ. David, thanks again one more time.
Thank you.